Intel's Coffee Lake's flagship, the Core i7-8700K is in our view the fastest gaming CPU that money can buy right now, but what if you don't have $350 to spend on a new processor? The new i5 line looks almost as exciting, bringing 6 physical cores to the mid-range market for the first time. The 8600K continues Intel's tradition of cutting hyper-threading and reducing clocks while leaving overclocking as an option, shaving off $100 in the process. However, just as intriguing is the i5 8400, a $180 190 hexacore offering that offers remarkable value. Going into this review, we had plenty of questions. Bearing in mind how brutally powerful the 8700K is, to what extent is hyperthreading necessary? Is the i5 just as good once overclocking is factored into the mix? Just how fast is the more budget-oriented 8400, and how does the new Coffee Lake stack compare to last year's Coffee Lake? If you're still holding on to your legacy 2500K as many are, just how much of an upgrade are the 6-core i5s, and to what extent can AMD's Ryzen 5 compete? That's a lot of topics to cover, so this review will be somewhat on the lengthy side, so let's kick off with the core specs and some degree of confusion. Intel's official base and boost clocks for Coffee Lake show a yawning chasm between the 8400 and the 8600K, but in actual fact, running flat out, the budget chip happily locks at 3.8 GHz, a state of affairs confirmed across multiple motherboards, even remaining the case when we paired it with a stock Intel heatsink and fan. The boost clocks actually signify the fastest single-core speed, suggesting just a small step between 8400 and 8600K, yet real-world testing does show a more noticeable gap. We tested and benchmarked the Core i5-8600K on a Z370 board supplied by MSI, the Z370 Gaming Pro AC, using the Z370 chipset required for 8th Gen Coffee Lake processors. The LGA1151 V2 socket is identical to Z170 and Z270 boards, but unfortunately older chips will not run on this platform, while the new CPUs are also incompatible with prior gen boards. This MSI offering features DDR4 support up to 4 GHz and beyond, Mystic Light RGB leading, 2x Turbo M.2 slots, Intel Optane compatibility and Intel Gaming LAN and wireless support. 2-way NVIDIA SLI and 3-way AMD Crossfire is possible, while audio duties are taken care of by Audio Boost 4 technology with NAHIMIC 2. 4 USB 3.1 ports, HDMI 2.0 and DisplayPort complete the package. We paired this board with 4 sticks of Corsair Vengeance LPX at 3000 MHz, with 15,171,735 latency and ran everything from an OCZ Trine 100 SSD. Corsair's ERM1000i supplied power, while the firm's H100i GTX closed-loop cooler sat atop the processor for the duration. The Core i7-7700K was benched using the same components, albeit on an MSI Gaming M5 Z270 board, while the 8700 was tested on an Asus Z370 Maximus 10 Hero. Meanwhile, the 3770K was tested on an MSI Z778 G45 board paired with 16 GB of Corsair Vengeance 2400 MHz DDR3 11,131,331 latency, while the same RAM was used to test the 4790K, running on an MSI Z87i Gaming AC Mini ITX board. Please refer to our Ryzen 5 1600-1600X vs Core i5-7600K review for specific AMD system setups. There has been some discussion on certain Z370 boards auto-overclocking Coffee Lake processors beyond their spec, but Cinebench numbers from MSI, Gigabyte and Asus boards resulted in just a 3% variance, even with all-core turbo disabled. This option, enhanced turbo, as some call it, essentially allows Z boards to run overclocked processors at their maximum single-core turbo speed, and it usually activates itself automatically if you activate the XMP profile on DDR4 memory. On the one hand, it can skew benchmark results, but on the other, this is the likely minimum speed you will be running the processor at if you buy one. It's free performance out of the box. Our results are with all-core turbo disabled, and will be manually overclocking later. Rich presents a video breakdown of Core i5 8400 and the overclock-capable i5-8600K. Core i5 8400, Core i5 8600, OK, Core i7 870, OK, Core i7 770, OK, Core i5 760, OK, Course threads 6666, 612, 4844, base boost clocks 2.8 GHz, 4.0 GHz, 3.6 GHz, 4.1 GHz, 3.7 GHz, 4.7 GHz, 4.2 GHz, 4.5 GHz, 3.8 GHz, 4.2 GHz, L3 cache 9 MB, 9 megabytes, 12 megabytes, 8 megabytes, 6 megabytes, architecture, Coffee Lake, Coffee Lake, Coffee Lake, Kaby Lake, Kaby Lake, TDP 65W95, W95, W91, W91W. Our focus is on gaming performance, but we ran some basic benchmarks to get an idea of what to expect from our test processors. Cinebench R15 is a rendering tool that calculates a complex scene using all the cores and threads available, and then reruns the same test with just a single core active. It gives us a baseline for competitive comparisons. There are few surprises here in terms of single-core power. The Coffee Lake i5s aren't as quick as the 870 OK, but bearing in mind the single-core turbo advantage the flagship K chip has, we expected a wider differential on that particular result. The i5 results show the 860 OK at stock speeds equaling the 7,700 kiloseconds single-core performance, while outperforming it in multi-thread throughput. It's a fascinating competition here between two extra physical cores versus hyper-threading, a theme that will crop up several times during this review. The 8400 is a touch slower with one core active but is within touching distance of the 770 OK when all 6 processing threads are active. The takeaway is that this initial synthetic bench suggests that a stock 860 OK offers last-gen i7 power, with the budget-oriented at 8400 not too far behind. Meanwhile, as expected, Ryzen 5's 12 threads hand in extra multi-thread performance, but single-core power is off-pace and we should expect that to persist into gaming results. Our handbrake encoding tests are based on the 4K processing we carry out for our own video encoding we use for YouTube and our download site, digitalfoundry.net. Those physical cores clearly matter here, with both H.264 and the super heavy HEVC encoding seeing the i5s beat the 770 OK. Ryzen can keep up in H.264, but the X265 encoder used for HEVC files utilizes AVX instructions heavily, and AMD is off-pace here. Core i5 8400, Core i5 860 OK, Core i5 760 OK, Core i7 770 OK, Core i7 870 OK, Ryzen 5 1600, Ryzen 5 1600X, Cinebench R15 single-core 167 quintillion 188 quadrillion 173 trillion 187 billion 191 million 141,155 Cinebench R15 multicore 931 1046 654 963 1427 1137 1207 handbrake H.264 16.5 FPS 17.8 FPS 10.4 FPS 14.5 FPS 19.7 FPS 17.4 FPS 17.8 FPS handbrake HEVC 6.5 FPS 7.2 FPS 4.4 FPS 6.3 FPS 8.1 FPS 5.4 FPS 5.7 FPS Gaming analysis begins with an Intel showdown and attempt to place the new i5s within the current gen and last gen core hierarchy. We're a little uncomfortable with reviewing the Core i5 8400 using a Z370 overclocking board, so we've limited its memory bandwidth to 2666 MHz, the limit on upcoming cheaper boards, and used a standard Intel cooler. In addition to Coffee Lake and Kaby Lake processors, we've also included Skylake's locked Core i5 6500 in the benchmark lineup. Its performance should be relatively close to the 7400, the last-gen locked processor that Intel's new entry-level i5 replaces. As always with our gaming tests, we try to gauge relative CPU performance by removing the graphics card as a bottleneck, using an overclocked Titan X Pascal running at 1080p resolution. The CPU's task is to run game logic and prepare instructions for the GPU, so we run all titles at max settings or close to it in order to ensure the toughest gaming workloads. Ashes of the Singularity's CPU test is like a synthetic bench within a game engine and reveals that hyper-threading remains highly potent. The i7 870 OK has a commanding lead, while the last-gen 770 OK is still a great performer, with 4 cores and 8 threads beating the i5 8600 kiloseconds hexacore setup. On the flip side, Rise of the Tomb Raider and The Witcher 3 reverse the trend, with the 860OK besting the 770OK. Otherwise, results between 860OK and 770OK are similar, and from our perspective, the takeaway is clear. If you bought into the old Coffee Lake line, you still have access to excellent gaming performance. The 770OK was and still is a great performer, so if you are running a less capable chip on the old platform, you still have a good upgrade option available. There are some great results from the Core i5 8400 too. The generational leap from prior locked i5s presented here by the i5 6500 is simply tremendous, and while not quite on par with the stock 860OK or 770OK, the results are very close overall. The Far Cry engine is heavily reliant on single-core power and memory bandwidth, so the 8400's result shows relative weakness here, but it's still a great result compared to older locked i5 performance. Elsewhere, most results show it comparing well with the 770OK. Not bad for an entry-level i5. The Witcher 3 saw the most dramatic Genongan improvements we saw with Coffee Lake, to the point where the 860OK significantly outperforms the Coffee Lake 770OK. The i5 8400 manages to keep pace with the last-gen flagship 1080p Titan XOC Core i5 8400, Core i5 860OK, Core i5 760OK, Core i7 870OK, Core i7 770OK, Core i5 6500 DDR4, frequency 2666 MHz, 3000 MHz, 3000 MHz, 3000 MHz, 3000 MHz, 2400 MHz. Assassin's Creed Unity, Ultra High 131.1, 132.2, 121.4, 135.0, 132.2, 104.8. Ashes of the Singularity CPU test 35.3, 40.1, 29.6, 52.2, 41.9, 24.8. Crisis 3, very high 129.3, 139.5, 99.4, 176.9, 138.2, 84.2. The Division, Ultra 135.7, 138.1, 132.0, 138.1, 133.8, 128.7. Far Cry Primal, Ultra 128.4, 139.9, 117.2, 140.0, 137.9, 92.6. Rise of the Tomb Raider DX12, very high 121.6, 130.2, 89.7, 140.0, 126.5, 72.6. The Witcher 3 Ultra, no hairworks 139.8, 154.2, 97.7, 170.0, 139.4, 83.0. Hand on heart, we have a real soft spot for AMD's Ryzen 5 1600 and 1600X, the former in particular, owing to its decent overclocking and excellent bundled cooler. In fact, given the choice between a last-gen i5K chip and the Ryzen 1600, our recommendation goes to the Red Team, owing to stronger gaming performance under the most demanding multi-threaded games. But Coffee Lake's i5 changed the game. We've got stock performance numbers below, ranging from our entry-level Core i5 8400 up to the most expensive 8-core Ryzen 7 1700 with those excellent Ryzen 5s in the middle. Far Cry Primal dramatically demonstrates Intel's advantage in games that favor a single thread, while The Witcher 3 and Rise of the Tomb Raider also show commanding leads in game engines that are heavily threaded, and the latter was tested with the Ryzen optimization patch installed. Coffee Lake's is clearly faster overall, and by extension, would rate the new i5s as more future-proof, especially as there is a clear upgrade path to i7, while Ryzen 7, even when overclocked, only offers a small boost over the 1600 and 1600X. However, forensic analysis of the Crisis 3 stress test shows Ryzen can actually outperform Coffee Lake in the most intensive areas of the benchmark. Meanwhile, some scenes in AC Unity reveal occasional microstutter on the i5 that we don't see on Ryzen. Given a straight choice, we'd take Coffee Lake over Ryzen for gaming, but well worth a mention is the cost of the surrounding system. Right now, there are some very cheap B350 boards out there that work beautifully with Ryzen 5. Meanwhile, Coffee Lake is only served by expensive, overclock-centric Z370 boards. We've used MSI and Asus boards extensively in our testing, and they're excellent offerings, as you might expect, but there's a good argument that aux-centric mainboards are overkill for the locked Core i5 8400. The Coffee Lake i5s are typically a lot faster than the 6-core Ryzen 5s. However, Crisis 3's most heavy scenes can see Ryzen 5 take point, are rare examples of its extra threads making a big difference. 1080p Titan XOC Core i5 8400 Core i5 8600K Ryzen 5 1600 Ryzen 5 1600X Ryzen 7 1700 DDR4 frequency 2666 MHz 3000 MHz 3200 MHz 3200 MHz 3200 MHz Assassin's Creed Unity Ultra High 131.1 132.2 116.4 118.7 114.8 Crisis 3, very high 129.3 139.5 124.9 130.9 126.7 The Division Ultra 135.7 138.1 129.8 130.9 129.8 Far Cry Primal Ultra 128.4 139.9 91.8 96.1 84.7 Rise of the Tomb Raider DX12 very high 121.6 130.2 95.6 99.8 95.2 The Witcher 3 Ultra No Hairworks 139.8 154.2 106.1 111.6 109.3 As a locked processor, the 8400 is omitted from this next test, which centers on overclocking. Our 8600K matched the 8700K in hitting 5.0 GHz with a simple multiplier and voltage tweak in the BIOS. 1.3V did the trick. In fact, we suspect that our i5 8600K sample may actually go higher as temperatures were significantly lower than our i7 running at the same clocks. We've stacked up both 5.0 GHz Coffee Lakes up against Kaby Lake and Ryzen, all operating at the fastest speeds we could extract from them. The delta between the stock 8600K and the 5.0 GHz overclock ranged from nothing to 10% in Crisis 3. It's clear that even with an overclocked Titan X Pascal running at 1080p resolution, CPU technology is so powerful that we can even hit GPU limits here, and by extension, we do wonder how much more the Coffee Lake i7 may have in the tank. It's fascinating to see the Core i7 7700K remain competitive with the Hexa-Core i5 despite the fact that it's 2 cores and 200 MHz down against the 8600K. We've also factored in both Ryzen 5 1600X and the Ryzen 7 1700 at 4.0 GHz here. 1700X and 1800X tend to have the same limits and perform identically in our tests. Crisis 3 remains Ryzen's friend, but the results demonstrate that even with our current GPU limit, Intel has much more overhead, and again, we believe that it offers a more future-proof system overall. This is not to say that Ryzen is not a great product. An overclocked 1600 or 1700 offers fantastic value, but the recommendation there would be to deploy Ryzen in a system not primarily targeted for gaming, where the additional threads can make a difference in productivity tasks, for example. Overall, the results here continue to confirm our theory that Intel's hyper-threading technology allows its CPUs to punch above their weight. It's the key to the i7 8700 kiloseconds gaming dominance. It's keeping the 7700K in contention as a superb performer, and looking further down the range, it's also the reason why the bargain basement Pentium G4 560 offers such exceptional value. The ashes of the Singularity CPU stress test is like a synthetic bench in a game engine, and the surprising takeaway is just how well the 7700 kiloseconds 4 cores with hyperthreading and a clock speed deficit manage to compare with a 5.0 GHz Hexa-Core processor. 1080p Titan XOC Core i5 8600K Core i5 8600K 5.0 GHz Core i7 8700K 5.0 GHz Core i7 7700K 4.8 GHz Ryzen 5 1600X 4.0 GHz Ryzen 7 1700 4.0 GHz DDR4 frequency 3000 MHz 3000 MHz 3000 MHz 3000 MHz 3200 MHz 3200 MHz Assassin's Creed Unity Ultra High 132.2 133.1 133.4 132.9 119.8 120.2 Crisis 3 Very High 139.5 153.6 179.6 145.5 134.3 142.3 The Division Ultra 138.1 138.5 138.1 133.9 130.9 139.9 130.5 Far Cry Primal Ultra 139.9 143.6 143.6 140.1 100.9 96.9 Rise of the Tomb Raider DX12 Very High 130.2 136.2 141.2 131.0 100.2 104.5 The Witcher 3 Ultra No Hairworks 154.2 164.6 172.3 145.2 115.6 120.0 If there's one regret we have with Coffee Lake's launch, it's that only premium Z370 boards are available, and this presents problems for prospective owners of the locked Core i5 8400. Unless you're looking to upgrade to the i7K chip further on down the line, there's little point pairing a more budget-oriented processor with a richly equipped, costly motherboard. We've tried to simulate real-world conditions for the 8400 in this review by using a stock cooler and 2666 MHz RAM, which will be the processor's bandwidth limit on the upcoming cheaper boards. However, you can run the 8400 in a Z board, and in theory, you can then extract extra performance from the processor by using faster memory, a state of affairs we've seen time and time again in both Intel and AMD processor reviews. In these final tests, we compare gaming performance in 3 benchmarks that have previously shown some dramatic improvements by scaling DDR4 bandwidth. Both Core i5 8400 and i5 8600K at stock frequencies are tested below, and there are 2 takeaways. Firstly, running a Coffee Lake's i5 with 2133 MHz is not recommended. There is performance boost ranging from 8 to 12% in opting for 2666 MHz RAM instead. However, the jump from 2666 MHz memory to 3000 MHz memory is much lower, generally just 3% or thereabouts. Memory bandwidth scaling is the only reason you'd want to put a locked chip like the i5 8400 into a Z370 board, and as such, the meager bump to performance from more expensive modules only serves to strengthen the case for waiting for the cheaper boards to appear. The Core i5 8400 is a value play, best suited to a value board assuming it performs similarly, of course. CPU performance tends to scale in gaming with memory frequency. However, gains are minimal beyond the processor's stock 2666 MHz DDR4 support. 1080p Titan SoC Core i5 8400 Core i5 8400 Core i5 8400 Core i5 8600K Core i5 8600K Core i5 8600K DDR4 frequency 2133 MHz 2666 MHz 3066 MHz 2133 MHz 2666 MHz 3000 MHz Far Cry Primal Ultra 114.5 128.4 133.0 125.9 137.0 139.9 Rise of the Tomb Raider DX12 Very High 110.0 121.6 122.6 113.0 126.0 130.2 The Witcher 3 Ultra No Hairworks 123.9 139.8 142.3 129.9 146.4 154.2 When news first leaked of Intel's jump from 4 to 6 cores with the new Coffee Lake processors, the biggest question we had concerned the relationship between the last gen i7 and the next gen i5. Surely 6 physical cores could trump 4, even if hyper-threading was enabled. The truth is that both i5 and older i7 have their own strengths and weaknesses, but by and large, the Core i5 8600K is a touch faster than the stock 7700K, while the i5 8400 is slightly off the pace. Bearing in mind that the Core i5 prices are lower, especially so with the i5 8400, we're seeing a significant increase in value for the user, and in terms of price versus performance, there's no doubt that the locked Intel processor is the new mid-range gaming king. It's fast enough to take the challenge to the more expensive Ryzen 5 processors, and even with 5.0 GHz overclocking in play, there are relatively few examples of the 8600K comprehensively outperforming the 8400 in a game-changing way, bearing in mind the frequency and price differentials. With a good idea of how the i5 and i7 lines stack up now, our recommendations are pretty straightforward. The i5 8400 is a no-brainer in terms of what it offers and how it compares to the competition, but it should be paired with one of the upcoming, cheaper motherboards, or else the absolute cheapest Z370 model you can find. The i5-8600K effectively replaces the last-gen i7, and for those willing to invest now to get a more stable system in the longer term, that's a good bet. For Kaby Lake i5K chip owners feeling aggrieved by the lack of 8th-gen compatibility, you can at least take comfort from the fact that the i7-7700K will be dropping in price like a stone now and will offer great performance on your system as a potential future upgrade. The weird world of 80s computer books, learning basic in the shadow of the bomb. For those doggedly holding on to their Core i5-2500K or 35700K chips, both of the new i5s offer substantial increases in performance, anything up to a doubling in frame rate, even with a 4.2 GHz overclock on the older chip taken into account. However, in the case of both, a cheaper route forward to refreshing your system is available with a 37700K upgrade paired with 2400 MHz DDR3, a process we've described in the past. Paired with a meaty overclock, your old platform can be brute forced to its limits and will hand in some decent results, but you'll miss out on the additional performance and power efficiency offered by the new Kaby Lake processors. In terms of where the Core i5 offerings leave the i7-8700K, well, it's pretty much the same old story. The i7 has always been there for best-in-class performance, but the 8th generation takes that to the next level, and the 8700K is a hugely impressive piece of kit. For those running 120Hz or 144Hz high-frequency displays, the 8700K keeps your frame rates higher and your frame times lower, making it a great companion for a cutting-edge screen. However, if you're still in standard 60Hz display territory, the good news is that the new Core i5 is better than ever.